Welcome back to the JumpifyLabs podcast, where we spotlight leaders who are pushing the boundaries of growth and personal development. Today, we're joined by Janet Livingstone, a leadership coach who has a global background from Slovakia to Seattle, helping leaders unlock more authentic ways of showing up. We're also going to dive into one of her passions, how psychedelic integration can fuel leadership breakthroughs. Janet, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jay. It's great to be here.
It's amazing. Thank you for being here as well. Let's start off. You've lived all over the world: Prague, Slovakia, Bolivia, Zambia. What drew you to having such a global journey?
I was really, really lucky as a kid. My parents always took us places. And my mother came from Canada, from Montreal, my father from the States. And there was already a richer cultural background than if I had had two parents from Massachusetts, which is where I grew up. So we traveled a bit, and then I was always just really curious. I grew up with an ear for languages. Just that was the way I was born. And so my mother introduced me to French when I was 7. She said, "Okay, you're 7 now. It's time for you to take French lessons." And when you're 7, you're like, "Okay," 'cause you have no idea what that's about. And that just continued, and, I traveled in Europe as a younger person. The biggest sort of breakthrough for me, or, like, the watershed moment for me, I have to say, was being in grad school. I was in grad school in from '89 to '91. And during that time, all the revolutions in Central and Eastern Europe were happening. And actually, one of our professors at grad school was Madeleine Albright, who was the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, right? She was the Foreign Secretary for the States. Sorry, I'm using outdated terminology, I think, was connected to Czechoslovakia. And so I had an opportunity after the revolution in Czechoslovakia to go there, like really soon after the revolution, like 5 months. Yeah, and so I witnessed all kinds of stuff. People going, "Oh, we're free," and then people going, "Nothing has changed. Why hasn't it changed?" Like it was very intense. And that was my first point of living abroad fully, not just studying, but living and working. I had to learn the language. I had to do all kinds of things. And imagine being dropped into a country that you literally knew almost nothing about because it was part of 2 blocks, right? It was the communist bloc versus the West, quote, unquote. So, I was dropped into a country where I didn't know what their daily life looked like. They had no idea what mine looked like. They would ask me questions like, "What do Americans eat for breakfast?" I was like,
Sugar.
"Well," like, sugar, eggs, steak, huevos rancheros, you name it, right? But their habits and what they were used to was much more limited. This is a long answer to your question, but things just rolled. Like, I worked for a nonprofit that did democratization work, right? So they were coming out of communism, quote unquote, or they called it socialism. So they needed help with tertiary education. They didn't have any professors there who had a base in Western thought, like Western economics. They were teaching Leninism, Marxism oriented social sciences. So I did that for a few years. I met my husband there. So that turned into a whole phase of my life. And then I lived in other places because I eventually moved jobs to global health. So I got to live in Africa. I got to consult in Bolivia. I got to do incredible things. I've been incredibly lucky. It was all really, 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 really hard and beautiful. And it just makes your life richer.
Yeah, I agree. I've lived abroad. I'm currently abroad right now in Colombia,
Oh,
but I
really?
love how it just stretches your mind, and
Absolutely.
you start to think in different languages, which is, I think, is like when it happens, you're like, whoa, I'm counting in a different language, I'm thinking and speaking in a different language. But for you, since you have studied abroad, worked abroad, of course, speaking multiple languages as well, what's maybe one expression in a different language that captures one of your core philosophies better than English does?
Oh my goodness, what a great question. I'm trying to think. So the Slovaks say we have something similar. The Slovaks say, which means like wherever you go, there you are, right? Basically. It's the same kind of thing we have about, well, if you wanna change your life, change yourself rather than going somewhere else, right? Wherever you go, you take yourself with you. You can't run away from yourself. If there's things that you wanna work on them. Love
That's
yourself,
beautiful.
work on yourself. Yeah, I guess that's the
Yeah.
closest I can get.
It's okay. I mentioned to you earlier before this, I wasn't gonna throw you any haymakers, but I thought that was one fun one to add in there.
Yeah. Yeah, man. But then what's this with the haymakers? No haymakers? Yes, haymakers? No,
It's
it's
all good.
fine, it's fine. I
Yeah.
love to think
Let's
about this stuff because you learn from the language too. You can really, really
yeah.
learn about a culture from how they use the language or what words they use. Like, I remember being really shocked in Russian, so that was the first Slavic language that I studied. I studied Russian in college. In Russian, there's no actual equivalent for privacy.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, there's an equivalent for loneliness, but not for privacy, right? So there's no inherent value attached to a person having their own downtime for themselves. And
Wow.
it tells you something about boundaries between people. They're very low or non-existent there on
Yeah.
that side. Yeah,
That
anyway,
is very interesting.
it's a
It
tidbit.
reminds me of what as well as about my time in Thailand, how it was the numbers I'm sure I'm butchering, but it was like something like 500,000 words compared to the English language, which has multiple millions. And that's why certain Thai people cannot find the right words to be expressive.
Mm,
So rather than having the conversation, some of them would rather avoid it.
mhm.
So, not sure if I'm butchering that saying, but I was told that before when I was living in Thailand. But let's talk about the brass. Let's talk about the good stuff when it comes to leadership coaching. You did mention that a lot of organizations treat coaching as a bit of a checkbox. What's broken about that approach?
Yeah. Organizations, tend to function based on timelines and budgets and results. And that's normal. But it's really hard if you take that approach toward human beings because we as people develop throughout our lives. It's a running process. It's continual. And for us to learn and change and develop, it takes time. And we do it our whole lives. And a lot of us do it in spurts because we're brought up in certain ways. Like you do this, but you don't do that. This is right. This is not right. Your parents give you parameters. And then you have stuff around those parameters like, okay, I'm going to do this because if I don't, I'm going to be shamed or I'm going to be punished. And we develop that self critic. And so when companies think that they can quote unquote fix people or develop people with 4 coaching appointments of 1 hour each over the span of 3 months or 4 months, maybe once a month, it's so dwarfed. It's such a drop in the bucket that I find it disappointing, especially when it comes to larger companies that do really have a lot of cash. But the mindset on talent development and HR is that, "Oh, well, you only get a certain number of coaching sessions a year because that's the budget, and we prefer to put the lion's share of our budget into R&D, innovation, whatever," right? So the bottom line mentality doesn't translate well to the human development mentality, basically. So for anyone to make real steps forward, doesn't matter what level of leadership you're at, if you're really serious about your development, you need to have a trusting relationship with your coach. And developing trust also really takes time, especially when everything happens online. It takes longer, right? Because all of our biological cues and body language and all the hormonal stuff that happens when we meet people in person doesn't happen nearly as much online. So to build trust and to feel really okay with that person, you need at least 2 or 3 sessions. So then on the 4th session, if that's your last or even the 6th, you've barely just begun to do the real work because you can only do deeper work when you trust the person you're with. That's my answer. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, on the trust piece, you mentioned before that you have worked with C-suites and C-suite executives, and maybe they become a little bit less coachable from your experience, or that you've seen that they're a little less coachable, and that you're kind of working with the ones a little bit below that. Can you share a story that helped shape that perspective?
Sure. Couple of clients who were more highly placed came to mind. So when you deal with people who are at the top, they struggle with things that people lower down may not be working with so much. The first one is that everyone around them is looking to please them, which gives them a distorted perception of how they're impacting others. And a lot of leaders don't spend lots of time because they don't have it being in touch with lower level, mid level, or lower level employees in their companies. So then what happens? They get stuck in a bubble, right? And we can see it happening in politics today. You get stuck in a bubble. People tell you things that they think you want to hear. And if your own self awareness is low ish, right? Or only mid level, then you don't have the intuition. You're not getting the information from around you how people are reacting to you. So you may not recognize that you are having a negative effect. Let's say you're very command and control, which a lot of leaders who make to the C-suite are, right? Because it's a quick way to deal with things and you're decisive and people perceive you as being decisive and quote unquote strong. So say you're command and control and you're just blazing through things and people around you are actually put off by that, but they don't want to tell you. So then you get into a situation where you can't get real input from the people around you. So you're making decisions that are very isolated. And you may make the wrong decision. Or your past experience really colors you. Like I had a client who had been through a lot of trauma and stuff and actually was a bit paranoid. And he was spreading that around with the people around him. And he was convinced that certain things were going to happen and that he was going to turn things over, and he was convinced that he had more power than he had. And he ended up leaving where he was, which was a good thing, but he suffered on the way there. So, C-suite leaders tend to get where they get because of certain behaviors, and those behaviors are not always actually adaptive. It doesn't always help them. They get isolated. The lower down leaders have more of a chance, right? Because they interact with more people on a daily basis. And the most powerful thing you can do as a leader is ask questions, is let other people around you know that you're open to input because then they're going to be more inclined to collaborate with you rather than just waiting for you to tell them what to do. The more you tell people what to do, the more passive they get. This is a very long discussion, but those are a couple of reasons why I prefer to teach to coach like director through VP level because those folks are still working on themselves and perceive themselves as moving forward.
You bring something interesting when you said that they have a bit of a distorted view of their effectiveness, because I didn't think about it before, but yes, everyone is kind of like kissing their ass because they are on top. That's an interesting thing to point out. We're talking now about mid-level leaders. What's an example of a mid-level leader who maybe made some kind of transformation underneath your coaching?
Yeah. Um, so VP, a guy who went from director to VP, they started wanting to kind of, get the lay of the land, very, very unsure. And that's common, right? When you get promoted to director level, suddenly you really have to manage people. And a lot of managers who come up that way, who are technical experts who come up, they don't have people management experience. They have technical experience. They're at home in the technical discussions. But when there are people around them looking at them around the table, waiting or emoting, God forbid, right? They have not necessarily much idea how to deal with it. And this is across genders and orientations and backgrounds. This is not about, men can't deal with emotions. This is just across the board, humans. So that person really wanted to work on their people skills, right? While also being a thought leader, right? So being a thought leader is very cognitive. You come with ideas, you figure out how to express them in an influential way. But the people management taps more into the emotional intelligence piece, right? And emotional intelligence first requires self-awareness. So the work of someone at that level is often working on themselves, looking at their own emotional intelligence, taking a good assessment, a deeper one that helps them understand these are my strong points, these are my not so strong points. I'm more analytical, or I'm more influential, or I'm more of a stabilizer. I really need harmony in order to feel good enough to even do my own work. So I need my people to feel, in harmony, for example, right? And to do the self awareness part, to start inside. And then when that rises and you start to think, I can do this and I can do that and I can work on that other piece that's not as strong, I feel better about myself because now I know more about myself. And so now, the more I feel better about myself, the more I can sort of lay back a little bit and I can get to know the people around me in an authentic way, not just like, okay, tell me what your background is so I know what your strength is so I can use you, but more like, hey, you know, what do you like about this work? Where would you like to work more on? What would you like to work? How do you like to work? Right? That helps you get the lay of the land of your team, and that ups your people management skills. It's a process. I've seen people transform over 2, 3 years. I have coaching clients where I come back to them each year for, like, 6 months, and those are the most rewarding coaching assignments because you can see the thinking that they've done in the meantime. It's really, really gratifying for them because through the coaching experiences, also, they get to also view their own progress, right? They have something to measure it against.
Yeah, so it's good to get in front of well, I mean, a mid-level leader already definitely has habits, but you want to get to those habits, install the good habits before they ascend to the much more higher leadership roles. Okay,
Exactly.
very cool. Yeah, so now let's take a little bit of a pivot because leadership and psychedelics are two words people don't often hear often together.
Yeah,
How do you see them connecting?
yeah. So there are a couple ways. With psychedelics, so I did a 12-month study program, and that's where my knowledge comes from. I have studied and I've also done psychedelics. There are two ways. As a leader, you can do a therapeutic dose of something, right? Guided with preparation, and then afterwards with integration work so that you get the full benefit of the neuroplasticity that psychedelics brings. Like psychedelics actually can help your brain develop. You can actually grow pieces of tissue on the neurons, right? And this is positive. So it creates this neuroplasticity and you can have a lot of realizations about who you are, about where you fit in the greater environment, about what you want, right? Some people feel like, oh, this is my essence, or some people work out, memories and stuff while they're journeying. So a therapeutic journey can have a pretty big impact on someone. And those realizations, you can bring them to your leadership, right? If you understand while you're doing mushrooms that, you need to focus on a certain piece of your life that you've been neglecting, something that feeds you, then you can start doing that. And what that gives you, a feeling of calm or enrichment in life or whatever it is, you can bring it to your workplace. People are going to feel it. They're going to feel a shift in your energy, right? For me, it's about music. Every time I have a psychedelic experience, I do that with music, and that's recommended because music evokes all kinds of visions and emotions. So the music helps you see what's happening. I'll give you an example. Example from my own experience is In one of my first experiences, I saw what I would call the peaceful warriors standing on a mountain surveying the land, right? They usually appear to me kind of like cartoonish, so long flowing hair, all right? But the peaceful warrior stands in their power and they look over what's happening and they are free to make decisions because they're absolutely grounded in themselves on the earth. And I think for a woman, for me, feeling power in that way is absolutely beautiful because we go through life a lot of times feeling battered around, bombarded. People want stuff from us. We feel depleted, right? But this energy was something new and it was incredible. And I was able to access it moving forward. So this is the kind of thing that leaders who are also humans, right? I mean, we talk about leaders and leaders, but we're all human. So this is one thing they can do. It also, for me, it cut my anxiety a lot, right? Being an anxious leader is really, really hard. You expend a ton of energy trying to deal with your anxiety so that people don't notice, right? Because anxiety is usually a source of shame for us. Psychedelics in larger doses have that kind of effect. Then there's microdosing, which you can use to maintain and to enhance focus. And everybody's different. So I'm not saying that everybody should run and do a bunch of mushrooms or LSD or whatever. Psychedelics are illegal in most places on the planet, except for ketamine, but they are available. And so microdosing, which a lot of people are doing, can just be really useful. You take what's called a subperceptual dose. That means that you're not actually conscious of it having an effect. You don't actually say, "Oh, there, it kicked in. Okay." But you may notice that your focus is slightly better while you're working, or you can work longer, right? It doesn't mean you shouldn't take breaks. You definitely should. But that was the effect that it's had on me, doing microdosing of psilocybin mushrooms. And yeah, a lot of us suffer from, ADHD or some variation of it, and being online all the time only exacerbates that. It just makes it worse because there's so much to look at and so many distractions. So yeah, the leadership, I have, toyed with the idea of running retreats, and I'm going to start in 2026
All right.
to run some retreats. Yeah, yeah, in places where it's not illegal, obviously, and to get leaders together who want to get a deeper idea of who they are and what they need. And running groups is also really unbelievable because it helps people deal with their stuff while they're in a compassionate, safe environment with other people.
Yeah, definitely makes sense to be in that environment where everyone's kind of on board with this, I guess, different way of therapy, I guess, different type of medicine. But
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So being in that type of environment would just kind of makes me think like it would just integrate a lot more seamlessly. But on the topic of integration, there's obviously a difference between recreational use and intentional integration. What is the gap that leaders should be aware of?
yeah. So doing psychedelics recreationally, lots of people do it, but it's recreational. And people who do it don't necessarily know what happens in the brain and the process, and they don't know what integration is. So people who do recreational psychedelics don't intentionally spend time after their trip integrating what happened to them during the trip. This is what I mean by integration. Integration is looking back at what you experienced, making meaning if there's meaning to be drawn from what you experienced, offering your brain an opportunity to work out what the psychedelics has done for it. And by that specifically, I mean combining the left and right sides of the brain. The left side, the cognitive, intellectual stuff you can do, right? After after you've done psychedelics and you're in a more of a therapeutic setting, you can talk about what you saw, you can journal about it, you can try to figure out with someone what it meant for you. But mostly that's kind of cognitive activity. The other side of your brain needs expression, right? Drawing, painting what you saw or just what feeling you have about what you saw. It doesn't have to be specific at all. It can be completely abstract. Drawing movement. Movement is very, very important. Psychedelic experiences are full body, right? It's not just here. You get all kinds of body sensations. And I know a lot of people who have chronic pain and they start doing psychedelics, and when they're when they're journeying, they don't feel the pain at all. So movement, dancing, or doing slow yoga or tai chi or qigong it doesn't matter. Whatever feels good to you. Also, making music. I mean, there are all kinds of things you can do, but it's important to be intentional about it and make time for it, right? After the journey, and also then maybe the next day or in a couple of days, and then maybe one more time. So there are people who do this. There are people specialized in integration. Some of them are psychotherapists. Some of them are integration coaches who are trained. And then you have all manner of other people who do this because they do it. They're healers or they're shamans. So there's a really big difference there. So recreational without processing, which means that you don't really know what happened to you. You may have reawakened something. You may start to feel weird. You may have weird memories or depression or dreams, right? Or you may just say that was awesome and I want to do it again. But it's personal versus therapeutic, where there's a process to help you take full advantage of benefits from psychedelics.
Yeah, so integration can include journaling, movement, and even art. If someone does the recreational piece, there's these things happening to our brain. But if we don't, I guess, cement it through integration, what is the potential opportunity cost there for not doing the integration piece?
Well, there's a spectrum of opportunity costs. I mean, the on the, you know, low end, there's just like, oh, you had an opportunity to really, really benefit from this medicine that you took, but you didn't use it. So you just go through life like nothing, right? It's not harmful. It's just like, oh, well, you could have gotten more out of this. Then as you move forward, the opportunity cost can be you didn't see an insight that was there for the taking that you really could have used in your life, right? That you could have brought to your family relationships, or you could have brought to your self-awareness moving forward. And you could have brought it to the office in the sense that, oh, I feel different. I'm going to be calmer now because I worked something out during my journey. And so I can bring more of myself to my team, right? There'll be fewer boundaries to me listening to my team, helping my team move forward, bringing ideas. And then, yeah, as you move along, the extreme is that if you're not, if you have some underlying mental illness that you don't know about or some instability, which, lots and lots of people have, mental illness is not, it's no longer a stigma, it's no longer considered something unusual. If you don't know about that and you engage in recreational psychedelics, you can damage yourself in the sense that you can bring up a lot of stuff that you don't know how to handle, right? The most extreme one is suicidal ideation, which I yeah, that's why we have to treat psychedelic medicine with great respect because it opens us up. We see stuff in ourselves, and if we're not ready to handle it, then it can have some consequences. So don't do it unless you have thought about it. If you are taking psychiatric medications, you have to consult with a doctor. Definitely consult with a doctor because, for example, if you're taking antidepressants, which lots of people do, the classical antidepressants work on the same neuroreceptors that a lot of psychedelics do. Not all psychedelics, but like psilocybin, they work on the same neuroreceptors in your brain. So if you're taking antidepressants and you take mushrooms on top of that, the mushrooms are not likely to have much of an effect at all, right? and you'll be disappointed, and that may cause you to take more and more. And then you end up having a giant dose, and you may or may not be ready for that. So there are lots of things to think about. That's why I don't take psychedelics lightly. I think they're fabulous and they can really, really help us with our mental health issues, but we have to respect them and understand how they work.
Can some of these insights that we take from psychedelics, from the experience, can they be self-realized through those integration actions like journaling, movement, art, music? Or is it best to have someone there to kind of guide you through it and withdraw, pull those insights out of you? Because we're in our own brain, and then the psychedelics are not going to magically change our brains. Yes, on a neuroplasticity level, it's going to shift things, but having those insights to be able to be like, okay, I just had this realization. Is just the activities alone enough to pull them out?
That's a great question, Jay. Thanks for that question. I really think that if if you're gonna do a decent dose of psychedelics, right, where you really feel something and you have visions and you may not feel fully mobile, like, right, you're not gonna be able to get up and drive a car, certainly. I think it's really wise to do your first major experience with somebody, with a sitter, with guided a facilitator who's trained. That person will help you with the integration process, and then you understand what it means to have an integration process, right? Because most people, we're trying to process something we can't see inside our brain. So we don't necessarily know how to do it for ourselves. We can read about the process, but we don't know. I recommend experiencing it first. And then if you feel safe doing psychedelics by yourself, which is a question, or you're used to doing if you've been through a bunch of experiences and you feel like you know yourself better and you know and you can see clearly what happens, then yeah, sure, you can do integration activities by yourself. For sure. I encourage people to give themselves time, right? To make that time to do those things. My bottom line is it's really better to have a guide. But yeah, once you have experience, you can
Okay.
do quite a bit of work. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Just like not exactly like riding a bike, but if you know your limits, if you've done it a few times, then you know what to do and you know the practice of integration, then possibly I see that happening. Okay.
Yeah. Can I
Follow.
mention one other thing real
Of
quick?
course. Yeah,
I wanna
absolutely.
mention that people in the psychedelic field talk about set and setting. You probably heard this expression. Set and setting is really, really important. Set means what mindset are you in when you do the psychedelics, when you take the dose? And that can have a huge effect on what kind of journey you experience. And the setting, secondly, is where you are. You want to be somewhere where you feel safe. And when you're alone, you may not have full control over your environment once you're really into it, right? If someone comes to your door and is banging on your door while you're journeying and you don't have a sitter with you to get up and like answer the door and say, hey, this is not a good time, you're more vulnerable. So that's just another thing to keep in mind, the set and the setting.
Yeah, great insight there. How are leaders able to bring their insights back into the workplace without it being overly woo woo?
Well, that's up to the leader, right? So a leader can have insights about themselves and they can just simply bring that new feeling about themselves to the office in the way they behave. I'm not recommending that somebody come back to the office and say, "Well, I did mushrooms over the weekend and here's what I learned and here's how we're going to use that knowledge." There might be workplaces where somebody would feel safe enough to do that, but in larger companies in a, quote unquote conventional corporate atmosphere, no. So, here's what happened to me, and I've seen this happen with others. So psilocybin helped me bring my anxiety down, which meant that I was able to speak up more in meetings. I was able to bring my ideas more readily, and I was able to stand by those ideas and defend them when somebody else came, which happens all the time. Somebody else comes and goes, Yeah, that's a great idea. Maybe we should do this instead, right? And I would always step back and go, "Oh, yeah, yeah," right? Because I wasn't brought up to push back or debate a lot. But once the anxiety comes down, you can be like, "Well, yeah, but, my idea is based on this and this and this, and I think it could fit," right? It gives you, in a way, a little more courage because the anxiety is not freaking you out and you're not worried about how you're gonna react. It also helps with the self-criticism, right? Anxiety, can often be based on a really strong inner critic, and that's normal for us to have that. Somebody who doesn't have that at all is in trouble. But so those are some examples, right? Or if you see, right, you see the warrior and you say, "I do have power, and this is what the power feels like. This is what it feels like in my body when I feel powerful," right?
Hmm.
And you can just bring that to the office. You don't need to tell anyone that you're the powerful warrior who's also peaceful. You can just behave and say, "Hey, we're gonna have a meeting. Okay, how's everybody doing? I'd like us to look at these issues, and I usually will give you my opinion first, but today I'm gonna actually ask for your input first." I've seen a lot of leaders shift that way, and it's way more gratifying for them. They get more input, they get more ideas, they get more, period. The team gets more, right? And then they can make a decision.
Yeah, just hearing that, it sounds just so much more welcoming and collaborative that it just sounds like such a better way to start any meeting instead of here's what we're doing. I need you to do this, this, and this. I mean, it just sounds so much more, as you say, peaceful. And I love the nod towards the book, The Peaceful Warrior. I don't know if you read that, but that's a great book. It's also a pretty
Yeah,
good movie.
yeah.
Yeah, so you've coached, of course, both instances where you've integrated some psychedelics with your clients and when you haven't. In comparison of the two, how quicker, well, I mean, I guess quicker is not the word, maybe quicker, effective, like some of the more glaring differences between the one who's open to it and one who's more on the more just traditional side of coaching.
Okay, let me just clarify. You wanna know the difference between doing psychedelic integration coaching with someone and how quickly they are
Maybe,
developing versus a conventional coaching executive coaching assignment?
yeah, like some of the more, I guess, traditional types versus, of course, the new wave you're going through.
Yeah. So the psychedelic stuff is much more powerful and provides huge insights quickly, but it's a completely different experience, obviously. Somebody has to be curious about psychedelics and open to doing them. And therapeutic psychedelic experience, we're talking up to 15 or 20 hours of work with preparation, and then the experience itself can be anywhere from 3 to 12 hours, depending on what medicine you're taking, and then the integration piece. So it's a very different thing. With executive coaching, you usually have 50 to 60 minutes to sit with somebody. Conventional coaching is like really 95% cognitively based. It evokes emotion. It's not to say that there aren't emotions that come up during conventional coaching, or let me say ICF type of coaching, ICF being the International Coaching Federation. But since it's more cognitive work, it doesn't necessarily have the kind of impact that a psychedelic experience would, because psychedelics is kind of the full package, right? Once you come out of it, your cognitive function is running fine, and in the meantime, you've had this incredible emotional and somatic experience from psychedelics. That's why a lot of people in conventional coaching are starting to bring in additional modalities, starting to bring in breathing for folks who are coachees in the workplace. When I say executive coaching, I mean workplace-based coaching. For me, it's director level up. It doesn't mean C-suite, just as an aside. Um, a conventional coaching experience is really about the coach asking questions, the coachee answering in a trusting atmosphere. And the coach's job is to be curious and ask questions that helps bring the coachee to an insight. And the coach doesn't know what that insight is going to be. right? We don't come in with a formula. We come in with skills in listening and asking powerful questions. So we guide the coachee through what is an intellectual experience that evokes emotion. And a good coach can have a good impact on somebody. But if you compare 8 intense hours of a psychedelic journey to a 60-minute executive coaching session, there's no comparison. Now, all that being said, what I'm currently doing is I've added a methodology to to my sort of, which is called internal family systems. Internal family systems, or IFS, is a kind of combination of conventional cognitive therapy and the kind of work that psychedelics brings. It has similar effects on brain function. It also creates plasticity, and it's a conversation, but it focuses the coachee inward into discovering different parts of themselves that play different roles for them. It's based on the concept that it was brought by all the major psychologists from the late 19th century until now, of the multiplicity of the psyche rather than just "I am me, this is who I am, this is how I behave," like, which is very narrow. Most of us humans are complex. Let me give you an example. Very simple. Somebody may say to me during a coaching session, part of me just wants to like tell everybody to leave me alone so that I can do my own thinking and come up with my own decision. And another part of me like feels really unsure and wants to get everybody's input before I even start. These are two parts inside one person that are diametrically opposed. And that's common, right? Very often somebody will come and say, "Yeah, I don't know. Part of me wants to do this, part of me wants to do that." Every time I have a speaking assignment, I feel like part of me wants to run out on the stage and burst into song and be the star, and the other part wants to run home and pull the covers over my head because I'm terrified, right? This is normal for humans. So IFS intentionally helps coachees look at those parts because those are parts of us, and being able to make contact with those parts and figure out like why are you terrified to go on that stage, talking to the parts of yourself. It's an emotional somatic experience that you can work into coaching, so then your coaching becomes much richer. It's not just okay, you're struggling with this report that you have. What's difficult about it for you? What have you tried already? What's holding you back from doing that other thing you want to do with them, but you haven't done? Those are the kinds of questions I would ask in a conventional setting. But with IFS, if that coachee says, well, part of me feels like this with them, and part of me feels like that, and I don't know how I really feel, it's really confusing, then I would invite them to meditate, go inside, and try to look at those parts more deeply. And that has a bigger effect. So, yeah, this is a whole world, Jay. It's really hard for me to cover
It's
all of it
cool.
in a
No,
short
I'm
sentence.
I'm I'm super interested. It's cool. Like it sounds like you found a happy medium between the straight cognitive type of coaching, the executive coaching, your psychedelic coaching, and then it sounds like IFS happily blends the two for a spot that's maybe not on either side, but just again a happy marriage. So it sounds like I definitely want to dig into that too. But I know we're getting close to time. So are you taking private coaching clients or primarily working through corporate programs?
No, I'm doing both, absolutely, and I have slots that are open, so I am welcoming private coaching clients, and those clients can be, they come with their interest in various methods, and so I tailor my coaching to what the particular client is looking for.
And where's the best
Yeah,
place for listeners to connect with you on?
they can find me on LinkedIn at Janet Livingstone, my full name, and I'm the one in Seattle. There may be more than one. Also, my website is culture is key, one word, cultureiskey.coach. So they can find me there. And my email is janet at cultureiskey.coach. So, yeah.
Janet, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your time with us. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I knew this right from the beginning. When we were speaking the first time, I was like, I feel like this conversation is going to be so much fun. I think we can go on for a while about all the different topics. But yes, we'll put a pin in it for now. possibly get you back on to talk about IFS specifically the next time.
I would
But
love
for
that.
now, if you like this conversation with Janet, if you want more stories like this, more insights to how you can possibly grow using some of the methodologies that we have experts bringing on and sharing, be sure to tune in for more. Thanks so much. My name is Jay. Speak soon.